absolutely critical for the strength of our economy, for the strength of our community, that we grow our population, that we attract new people here and we retain the people that we have. So in our industry, we call that talent attraction, talent development. You all are a part of that population, and we want to invite more people to the table. So we've launched an initiative called Greater Peoria 2030. It's a 10-year talent attraction strategy, and in the true spirit of the Big Table, it is absolutely one of the most collaborative projects we've embarked upon. It includes our chamber here in Peoria. It includes the East Peoria Chamber, the Pekin Chamber, the Morton Chamber, the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, the Downtown Development Corporation, Discover Peoria, and so many other partner orgs that are all looking to figure out how we can develop a strategy that will be most attractive to people across the country. We want people to choose Peoria. We want people who could choose to live anywhere in the world to think of Peoria, Illinois as their home. And so we looked to experts on this particular topic, and we wanted to find the gold standard. And we also wanted to find that gold standard in a community that's very similar to our own. And we looked no further than Topeka, Kansas. So you'll learn a little bit about Topeka today. You'll probably be shocked to find out that Topeka and Peoria have so much in common. Not only are they similar sized communities, not only are they Midwestern communities, but they have similar challenges that they faced. Topeka and their Greater Topeka Partnership launched an initiative called Choose Topeka as a part of a broader strategy, and we consider them the gold standard for talent attraction. They have done tremendous things and completely transformed Topeka, Kansas, so much so that their population went from declining to growing, which is what we want to do here. We want to grow and create a more vibrant economy and a vibrant community. Topeka's done that, so we want to hear from the experts themselves. So without further ado, I'd like you all to join me in giving a great Central Illinois, Greater Peoria welcome to Bob Ross, Senior Vice President of Marketing for the Greater Topeka Partnership. Let's hear it.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I am really excited to be here with you all. I am Bob Ross. As Joshua said, I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the Greater Topeka Partnership. And honestly, I'm really honored to get to spend some time with you in this beautiful city. You know, I've been excited for this opportunity for the last, few weeks as I've been kind of thinking about what I get to talk to you all about. But I'm even more excited to be with this particular group of people, because what I love about this industry and what I love about the work that you're all doing here in Peoria is it's very much the work that we're doing back in Topeka. It's bringing together the people in your city that truly love this community and want it to be the best version of itself. And that is a journey that Topeka has been on over the last 10 years. And we've done it facing some pretty crazy headwinds because sometimes we were our own worst enemies. And so we had to learn how to get out of our own way and really work together to build the city that now we are really excited to boast about, because we're starting to see the fruits pay off. So over this time that we're going to have together, I'm going to take you through this journey we've been on as a community and talk to you about how we've been able to leverage quality of place and talent attraction to really rebrand our city and the region. So thankfully, we have an incredible tech team back there that's going to help navigate with me as I go on this with you. So I'm going to take you on to a little information about what the partnership is. And the partnership, it is a merger back in 2017 of 4 different entities. So in Topeka, we are a different model. So back in 2017, we brought together our CVB, Visit Topeka, our Economic Development Organization, Go Topeka, the Topeka Chamber, and our Main Street organization, Downtown Topeka, into one house. We merged them into one entity, and we did it because our business community, our community leaders, and our elected officials began to realize we needed to start talking with one voice. If we were going to truly achieve our potential, we had to stop arguing amongst ourselves, we had to stop going in different directions, and we all needed to get on the same page. Now, a partnership model is not for everyone, but what is important is getting each of you in this room aligned around the same vision of making this city what you believe it to be. And organizations like ours can be that nexus point to make that dream possible. And honestly, part of the success we have, and I don't like to brag too much about myself, but over the last 5 years, because the partnership has existed and because we've had an aligned voice, it's allowed us to be a nexus for that type of community action over the course of the last 5 years to kind of get this journey down the road. So to give you a little detail about what Topeka is as a city, as Joshua said, we're actually very similar to you in a lot of ways. You know, Topeka is a community that is 178,000 people in total. You know, it's a community that's fairly young. Average age is 38. We have an unemployment rate of 2.3%. We are the capital of the great state of Kansas, so there is that advantage that we enjoy from being a capital city and in having the state and federal pieces there. We are a diverse city for Kansas, but we are not as diverse as others. So we are a community that is 75% white, we are 15% Latino, and we are 7% African American. We have a very large Indian Asian community with a Hindu temple. We are also the home of the Potawatomi, Prairie Band, and Citizen Nation. They're heavily represented within our community as well. And the city itself was also founded very specifically. So it's a community that was born at the dawn of the Civil War as abolitionists and freed slaves raced into the Kansas territory and decided to build a place to make sure that Kansas would be a free state. And then Mexican immigrants came in shortly thereafter to build the railroads. So in our DNA, narratives of civil rights and social justice are the underpinning of who we are as an identity, and that commitment to diversity and inclusion is a cornerstone of our community persona. And that's why actually when you talk about the partnership, we have equity and opportunity at the center of everything we do. Now, if you look at us on the map, we are a little different than what you guys are. So the actual city limits of Topeka is a city of 125,000 people. But weirdly enough, in Shawnee County, which is where we're located, 98% of the residents of Shawnee County live in Topeka because we have 50,000 people that live in an unincorporated zone which rings around the city. This is a very affluent suburban ring of our community, and it ends up having a lot of really high quality of life and great schools. There are 6 public school systems within the Topeka area. But it is a little different maybe because we don't have different really community entities in Shawnee County to work with. We do have a couple small towns of Auburn, Rossville, and Silver Lake, but they're 1,000 people each. And so really their identity is very much a part of the Topeka identity. It's interesting to look at you guys side by side because as I said, we are very similar communities. You know, average incomes fairly similar. We're at 56, you guys are at 47. You know, I have found, our unemployment does tend to remain lower because we do benefit from having that government aspect heavily in our space. And the average commute time, we're honestly, we're a community you can get anywhere in Topeka in 15 minutes. And, that's a great value for us. And we're also a city that boasts some of the lowest cost of living in the country, which you do as well. And what's also interesting is that we're both cities that have been oftentimes living in the shadow of larger metros. You're being 166 miles from Chicago. Us, we're only 60 miles from Kansas City. So we definitely have like kid-sibling vibes in Topeka, and everyone in Topeka is constantly comparing themselves to Kansas City because we're just 45 minutes outside of the greater Kansas City area and some of their most affluent neighborhoods. So, learning Topeka's growth, learning about it really has to start first with Topeka beginning to own its own value and its own self-worth. Because for honestly the last 30 years, we have spent most of our time looking outside and comparing ourselves to other cities and honestly being very negative about ourselves. And we had to really start to look inward at what we have and to become very proud of what we are. And that kind of takes us to what I call the Topeka story. So, in every story, it starts off with the underdog moment, and Topeka was definitely an underdog for the last 30 years. We kind of hit some downbeat, and so if you look at it, we came out of the gate really hard. Like the city was thriving up until 1980. Up until 1980, we enjoyed 17% annual decennial growth. We are home to some major employers. Payless Shoe Source was founded there. The world's largest psychiatric clinic, Menninger's was there. Hill's Pet Nutrition, you name it. It was a golden era for the city. It was booming. Then something happened around 1980, and the city started to lose steam a little bit. We started to divest a little bit away from our downtown core, like many communities in that time. We built a beautiful mall on the west side of town. Everyone started leaving their downtown and going out there. And honestly, we started to export our talent needs to neighboring communities. In fact, you can look that by the time we get to 2010, 40% of people that worked in Topeka chose to live in either neighboring Lawrence or Kansas City if they made over $50,000 a year. So that means some of our highest income people weren't living in the community. They weren't investing in the community. They were driving in for work and they were leaving. But as a result, it became a capital drain on us as a city. And you may think, well, okay, well, Lawrence is only 20 minutes away. You know, does it really matter if they're living in Topeka or not? Oh, it absolutely matters. Because when your C-suite executives are not emotionally invested in your city, it becomes very easy for them to really not care too much about your city because they're not really living in it, they're just commuting to it. And part of the reason why that started to happen is that over that 30 years, as we started watching that growth decline, we took our foot off the gas of some very important quality of place initiatives. We stopped really believing that you had to make the city a beautiful place to live because we just assumed people would want to be there. And what you began to find is creeping blight started moving around the community. You know, you ended up having an overinvestment in our neighboring towns. And as a result, you know, just morale just declined. And that low morale was actually when we brought in, you know, a consulting group even 5 years ago. That was one of their key call-outs they told us. They looked at the fundamentals that Topeka offered. They saw everything that we had to bring to the table. But what they did find that was almost at a crisis point for us was the fact that community morale was at an all-time low. And I actually saw it every day. You could not say anything good about Topeka without people immediately dogging on you. And as a result, we had internalized all of this negativity into ourselves that it actually became a paralyzing force that inhibited any potential idea for growth. And I think it's because we started believing what everyone else was saying about us that we just kind of gave up. And it takes a group like yours, as it took us, you know, to start to say, no, we can be literally whatever we want to be, whenever we want to be. And that can make anything better and impossible. Now, morale's in the dumps, population has completely grown cold, and then the businesses started leaving. So all of a sudden, we started seeing some of our biggest employers deciding to move on to greener pastures. So you had, as I said, the world-famous Miniger Clinic had been in Topeka since its founding and had a beautiful campus, decided they were going to go out to Texas. Then you had Athene decided that they were going to leave and go to Des Moines, and then Payless Shoe Source, who actually I started my career there with for 20 years, they announced in 2017 that they are also going to Texas. And in fact, actually, since I worked at that company at that time, they gathered all 500 employees there in the corporate office that had been there since the 1950s and just said, newsflash, nobody wants to live in Topeka. We are going to Dallas. And newsflash, nobody in Topeka really wanted to move to Dallas. We actually really liked where we lived. We liked this community. And then, you know, selfishly, they went bankrupt and out of business. So, you know, there it goes. They should have stayed. But I often think about, I wish they could see us now. Like, I wish those same leaders that were so down on our community could see the city that we have now. Because in some ways, I get where they were coming from. In order to keep the type of legacy businesses that oftentimes have built many of our cities, you have to continue to reinvest in yourself to make yourself worthwhile for them to decide to stay with you. And so we had not done our side of the coin either. We had taken them for granted, and it was getting harder for them to attract talent to our community because when they were driving into the city, they saw a downtown that was not thriving. They saw a city that was not very diverse or interested in diversity. They saw a city that, frankly, they felt like they didn't need to be a part of anymore. And honestly, I think after Payless left, it was when we had a big wake-up call as a community. We're like, who's next? If we're not careful, if we don't get our act together, we could literally lose some of our most amazing businesses if we don't start investing back in ourselves to keep them. So that brings us to the exciting part in our journey, because honestly, as a community, we decided to do the work. We decided to work aggressively to reinvent ourselves. And actually, if any of you are ever been a part of a startup or launching a new business, in some ways you have to adopt that same mentality as a community. You have to decide for yourselves to almost start again. And you know what? You're starting not from scratch. You have all the foundations that you need in your community to launch something really incredible, but you have to start really looking like you're a pioneer within your own community and say, okay, we're gonna take this foundation, which is pretty darn good, and we're gonna go ahead and lift it up to a whole new level and make it something amazing. And honestly, guys, it gets very sometimes depressing when you're watching national and global news, but often what cheers me up is I just think about the fact that in my city, I can make a difference. In my city, I can make it be whatever. I can at least be a part of a team that can make it whatever I want it to be. And that gives me power and it gives me hope, even when things around the world don't necessarily fill me with hope. And honestly, that's something I encourage each of you guys to do, is that if you ever feel like you have your back against the wall, use it as an opportunity to decide to say, no, we're going to do this together. We're going to build something that will make the rest of Illinois marvel, and they will be surprised. And honestly, that's something I've been delightful about over the last 5 years, is that Topeka is constantly subverting the expectations of Kansas and the region. And those same people that were giving us, grief over the last few years are starting to take notice. So, what does a better Topeka look like? Well, for one, we knew our downtown needed to change. You would oftentimes come to Topeka, and our skyline's beautiful. Beautiful Capitol Dome, incredible buildings. We're right along the river. It has everything going for it. But for most, and as late as honestly 4 or 5 years ago, you would drive into our downtown, and it would actually be some lovely buildings and completely empty. And honestly, it was, up until a few years ago, we had 60% vacancies. So it started with investing, and it's been over $150 million in investment in the last 5 years to transform downtown Topeka into something that everyone in the community can be very proud of. You can see on that picture right there that there are actually more buildings than I can count anymore that have been completely remodeled and restored to their original historical value. And you've actually seen a lot of private investors really embrace this opportunity to bring these beautiful pieces of architecture back to life and transform it into something new. Now, downtown redevelopment, it took on different places. So first off, it started with the public sector coming alongside it. And so it began with infrastructure. The downtown core had been neglected. Water and pipes were not where they needed to be. Our streetscape wasn't great. And so it began with really reinventing historical Kansas Avenue, which is our main drag in our downtown, building pocket parks, expanding the sidewalks to create more cafe seating along it. I mean, really making that downtown glitter. I mean, there's statues now that line downtown because it also involved getting our private sector to come on board and sponsor some of these pocket parks so that as you're walking up and down downtown, it gave you something to see. So in the beginning, we kind of built a museum. It was lovely, but there was still no one there. But what ended up coming after that is we would end up getting those pocket parks, and then all of a sudden we started getting some private investment coming. And that came in the form initially of a new $34 million luxury boutique hotel. That was a huge anchor win for us, but it was because the public sector had given the private sector the confidence to invest. What followed ended up being multiple restaurants, and then ultimately, 2 years ago, we built another public sector investment, a new $11 million downtown plaza, which features live music throughout the week. It features fountains by the same team that built the Bellagio, and it allows there to be a community gathering space in our downtown where now thousands of people come out every week to watch free live concerts, to have celebratory moments, and it becomes a reason to be downtown, which is now inspiring more private investment. So, what also has happened during this time is that the dollars do follow the placemaking. As we began to make Topeka a more desirable and beautiful community, site selectors began to be more bullish on Topeka as a place to do business. And what we began to find is that our employment began to go up. We now, like I said, lead the state in the lowest unemployment. And also our GDP began to grow exponentially. So you can see back in 2016, our GDP was $9.6 billion. By 2020, we were thrilled because we were like, we got $1 billion in GDP growth in just 4 years. And then really excitingly this year, we got to announce we got another $1 billion in GDP growth in just 1 year, because we began to see this snowball effect of momentum for our community from an economic development standpoint. Because it's a whole lot easier for a site selector to choose you when they're also inspired by the type of place that they're seeing, because they're looking at a place where they feel like they can also attract workers to move to as well. And so for us, being able to have grown our GDP by $2 billion in just 5 years after starting this initiative has been transformative for us as a community, especially because if you look at our GDP when those companies like Miniger, Payless Shoe Source, Athene were there, we have a larger GDP now than we did back then. And that means that, yes, it sucked to lose those jobs. It was hard. But they did not define our worth as a community, and they do not define our full economic potential. And we've been able to grow beyond those legacy employers to build something better. Now, what that has meant also is that it has lifted all boats in our community. That growing prosperity, we've been able to cut poverty by 44% over the last 5 years. We now are the second lowest poverty in the state of Kansas, trailing only Johnson County, which is super bougie. And so we've done really well. Unemployment's down to 2.3%. Average household wages went up 33%. We're not perfect. We haven't fully arrived. But honestly, we always had this reputation as being kind of a dumpy city, a lot of poor people. You had all these people just judging us. And I'm like, you know what? No, we're an incredible city with a lot of opportunity. And honestly, we're making everyone in our community better off because they're able to capitalize by having lower costs of living, and now they have jobs and opportunity. Because guess what? All people without incomes, they're not necessarily poor people. They're people that are looking for opportunities. And in this room, we have the opportunity to give them the means that they need to thrive because they just want to live a better life for their family. And so I like to be able to be like, take that. So yeah, so we're doing really well on that front. Now also, fun fact for me is that crime is down 25%. So that was another thing. Everyone loved to point. It was like, Topeka, you're just going to get shot. You're not going to get shot. Unfortunately, we have two great media partners, two television stations in our community and a newspaper, and they love to report every single thing that ever happens in our city. And so as a result, all the neighboring towns, they don't ever get their crime ever just like blasted 24/7 on clickbait. We got all of ours all the time. And so everyone kept talking all the time about, Topeka's riddled with crime. No, we're a city. We do have crime, but we're not defined by our crime. And actually, also when you make a community more prosperous and more beautiful, crime does go down. And we've been able to really show people that actually compared to other cities definitely compared to Kansas City, but Denver, Nashville, Dallas, we are well below them. And we are now starting to take back that mantra and say, we're an incredible, safe community for everyone to live in. Now, comes down to the pride standpoint. I told you, historically, morale was in the dumps. We had terrible self-esteem as a community. We had internalized that negative belief. We decided to take ownership of that and really inspire our community to be proud to be Topekans. We did that through a couple ways. First off, a couple years ago, we decided to have a citywide contest to redesign our community flag. We had a flag. It was kind of basic. No one really cared about it. But I decided, you know what? We're going to create an event for the community. School children, local graphic artists, everyone would get to submit their ideas for what Topeka's flag should become. And as a result, we wanted to create a banner for the new Topeka that everyone could wear with pride. And so you can see it there with the sunflower on the left. It has spawned tons of merchandise. Now you'll see people wearing the Topeka flag on hats, t-shirts. People are waving it outside of their homes. That's on their license plates. Like, people love to tell people they're from Topeka. And that has now spread about, through our arts districts, through our downtown celebrations. Social media now starts pushing it out because your community members are your best brand ambassadors. And if the people that live here are not bragging about being from here, then that will always weigh you down. So launching that flag initiative became a big win for us. The next thing that was a big win for us is we actually started trying to put metrics to the negativity. And we started surveying our population to understand just how far we have to go. And that brings us to something called the Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is actually something that's often used by retailers around the world to understand how likely You are to recommend a brand, whether it's Coca-Cola or Apple. And what we started doing back in 2017 was surveying our community and asking them just how likely you'd be to recommend Topeka. That's all it is, one question. And we survey roughly about 2,000 people every year. And be prepared, because that first survey is gonna be a doozy. You're gonna get all the hate. But it was good because it gave us a benchmark for people to help us understand where we're at. In just 5 years, we've been able to grow the people that are considering themselves actively promoting the city, up by 40%. We've been able to push our increase to 120%, actually 120% for active promoters, and then 40% of people are the number of people who have a positive view of the Capitol. There you go. Sorry, I couldn't see it. But I mean, what you're really seeing, though, is that it really is becoming a real thing for people. They are actually beginning to really internalize that this is a great place that they want to be, and they're telling others. And the Net Promoter Score is something that you can do as a community that's very easy. It takes some time every fall or whenever you want to do it, but it helps you to understand how much progress you've made as a community and where you need to go. So then what we also decided to do is prioritize the next generation, really focusing on getting young adults back in Topeka and choosing to stay in Topeka. Topeka is a city that does have a university. We have a D2 school, Washburn University, with 7,000 students. We want to compete for them. We are also 20 minutes next to KU, so we want to compete for them as well. We believe because we have a low cost of living, we have an incredible city to start your life out on and to really thrive. So we started our Forge Young Professional Organization. Really, their goal was to bring the experiences that you would drive to Kansas City for to Topeka. I don't want you going to Kansas City to have to go see the best bands or the best music or to do beer yoga or whatever young people get to do nowadays. We want you to do that in Topeka. So Forge has kind of been our change agent in terms of creating experiences that challenge people's expectations of the city and make the community a more youthful and vibrant experience. And honestly, it's just fun for everyone. We have a Forge Fest every August at our downtown plaza. We bring some of the best bands from Kansas City in. It's free, and you actually just end up getting hundreds of young people dancing until midnight outside. And it becomes a really great opportunity for marketing, because I can get some great photos of it, but it also becomes an opportunity for people to begin to see that this is a city they don't have to go to some mega city to enjoy the best in. The next one's very important for us. We wanted to create a city that was for everyone. We had a reputation for being, this kind of boring community with not a lot of culture, not a lot of diversity. That's not even a true statement, even when we were struggling. The city's always been a diverse, rich cultural community. We just weren't bragging about it and talking about it and celebrating it. So all of our messaging now tries to paint a more complete picture of Topeka as a place. And it celebrates our Latin community, it celebrates our Native community, our LGBTQ community, our African American, our Indian community, our Asian community, you name it. We actually install banners throughout our downtown that say welcome in 9 different languages. Because our philosophy is we want to feel like an international city. And we want, when you visit, to feel like it is as cultured as any major metro wherever you go. And so we will put that forth with everything that we're doing. And honestly, as an organization, because we are the partnership and we operate in such a space where we can connect so many dots, we actively court diverse groups to help them to ignite their potential. So just this last month, the president of the CVB and I went to the Hindu temple, and we met with the Indian community and started learning about Diwali, started learning about Holi, started learning about the celebrations that are important on their calendar, and we're asking, what can we do to invest in you to bring your cultural experiences and your traditions to everyone in the community? How can we do a celebration in downtown which celebrates Diwali? What does that look like? I can't do it myself, but I can invest in you, I can support you, I can help you connect the dots, and we've been doing that with Pride, we've been doing that with our Fiesta Mexicana, and we've been doing it with our Black community, trying to cultivate a Black Joy celebration next year. So we're trying to use our privilege that we operate within the city to be able to lift everyone up so that everyone can be seen. Because talent attraction is gonna look like so many different types of people. And if you want them to choose your city, they need to see themselves in your city. So, to give you a glimpse at how we're trying to now market, we've done the work. Now we're trying to reintroduce the community and the region to what Topeka is now. So I'll show you one of our commercials that we dropped at the start of this year.
Topeka is the capital of Kansas.
You think you know Topeka? Think again.
Topeka is the capital city, but it's more than that. We've got more life, more charm, more of this, and tons of that. More music, more family, and definitely more heart. We are a place that has made history and brings history to life. So yeah, much more than a capital.
So we launched that campaign just to begin to show the region that Topeka is so much more than they ever gave us credit for. We wanted to paint the picture of a city that is diverse, that is young, that is filled with music and culture and dining and art and history, and has everything that Kansas City or Chicago would ever have, all with the benefits of a 15-minute commute and low cost of living and friendly neighbors. And it's using our ability to rebrand our community to whatever we want people to see us as, and then building the city that actually lives up to that brand that we're putting out there. So now that we built this new community and we're building it, now we need to get people to pay attention to it. I gotta get them to watch that video and other videos like it. And that's where we come to this next part of our journey, where we start talking about how we have decided to bet some money on this rebrand and this rebuild of our community. So that's where the talent incentive program came into it. We built this community, we had done all the work, we are still doing the work, but we still had this lagging brand perception that Topeka was not a place they wanted to be. Like, I could tell people I spent $150 million in our downtown, but it didn't matter if you lived in Kansas City because it was already off your radar. You've already ruled it out 5-10 years ago. So we started looking at what Vermont and Tulsa was doing, and they were offering incentives to be able to get people to come to Topeka. And initially, we got people complaining, well, why are you going to pay people to move to Topeka? Isn't that a little desperate? Like, no, what it is we believe so much in this community now. We believe in the work that we have done. We are going to put money on it. We're going to dare people to move to Topeka, and I guarantee you, I'll even give you up to $15,000 to buy a house here, and it'll be the best life you ever thought you had. And I guarantee you, you'll end up loving it. And so we ended up launching the program back in December of 2019, initially with absolutely no thought of remote workers. We knew they were out there, but it wasn't our priority. We were just wanting to compete for those people that were working in Topeka, but choosing to live outside the county. So initially, it was built to be a partially employer-funded program. So the incentives were modeled to be essentially an employer matching grant. We would give you $15,000 if you came to work for a Shawnee County employer, and what would happen is the employer would front the $15,000, and after you completed a year of residency and either purchased a home or rented one in Shawnee County after 1 year, we would essentially reimburse your employer 50% of the money they put out. The employer then had a lot of flexibility with the tool that they had at their disposal, because a lot of these companies were already giving $20,000, $30,000 relocations to their employees, but they were hiring them, giving them relocation packages, and then oftentimes they were just moving to Kansas City and commuting anyways. But now all of a sudden, some of the employers could give you a relocation package. Oh, and I could give you an extra 15 if you move to Topeka. That'll get their attention. Some employers, frankly, didn't have any money to give a relocation package at all, but we could make it so that they got up to $15,000 based on what they wanted. So maybe they could give $2,500. Fine, we'll match you another $2,500. So now as a smaller business, you can give $5,000 to relocate to this community and purchase a house in it. And it immediately captured the attention of the national media. So we were fortunate. This program went viral really fast out of the gate. And immediately, all of a sudden, I was getting calls from Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Times about what it was like to have to pay people to move to your city. And honestly, there is no such thing as bad publicity, because what it did is it allowed us to feed these beautiful images of our city and all the work we had done out to media outlets all over the world. And now all of a sudden, when you're Googling Topeka, you're now getting a bunch of reports back that are showing a lovely city that will happen to give you money if you want to live there. Now, then unfortunately a pandemic happened, and in March of 2020, everything changed. And so we had to adapt pretty quickly to the fact that there is a newly mobile workforce that's available. And we decided we're going to go after it. We're going to try it. So we amended our program, and we decided to go ahead and offer up to $10,000 for remote workers. And this proved to be a very valuable decision for us, because this program is funded by our economic development organization. So Shawnee County gives a half-cent sales tax that funds economic development opportunities in Topeka and Shawnee County. Like most cities around the country, these monies have historically gone after to attract brick and mortar businesses to your city. Like we just opened up one of the largest Walmart distribution centers in Shawnee County. That's historically what those funds have been for. We decided to take a portion of those funds, $300,000 a year, and go after the workers themselves and saying, you know what, sure, we may not be able to compete to get an Amazon headquarters in Topeka, but I can get some Amazon workers in Topeka. And then when they come here with a trailing partner and they're buying a home and they have kids and now they're volunteering in your community and they're bringing their dollars and shopping at your restaurants and they're investing their volunteer capital in your city, that becomes a very worthwhile investment. And it ended up being a really amazing success. So we we set aside 40% of our funds every year to go after remote workers, and 60% of the funds every year go after the employer-sided program to attract people to their businesses. Now, our expectations in the beginning, we were really targeting 25 to 44-year-olds. That was the plan. We were going after, we thought, a lot of tech workers. We thought they would be the ones that would be the most dynamic. And honestly, we thought that we would get about a 6x return on our investment in the first year. And we were trying to be very intentional about growing our diversity. Like I said, we are a community that is 75% white. We are trying to become a community that represents even more people. So we had to rely on equity towards everything that we're doing to try to bring new people, different people into the city. So to do that, we had to try to get the word out. One part was PR. The second part was launching a Choose Topeka website, which on your free time, please go to it because we spent a lot of time on it. It's choosetopeka.com. But it became an opportunity to present a new face to the city. We have a Visit Topeka tourism website, but we needed a more micro site that HR recruiters could use to essentially send out to recruits looking to move here. And we built it precisely to be a more aspirational view of the city. In fact, when I talked to the team that was developing it, I was like, I want it to feel like Austin. Because even if you've been to Austin, Austin doesn't feel like the way they tell you Austin feels like. But that's part of marketing. And so I was like, but make it feel like Austin, Texas. Because that's what it is it's tell all of the amazing things about art, culture, music, diversity that city has. We just need to tell that story on this site. And so when people would visit it, they would begin to see all those things that are very real things in our city, and that would begin to become the first step in attracting them and converting them to hires within our community. We did, like I said, spend a lot of time on the PR angle on it. We did a lot of digital and video ad placements. And as I keep going back to the idea of diversity, we made sure representation was front and center in absolutely everything so that people could see themselves in what that story is. Now, when you're doing something like this, you can hope for the best, but you have to be able to prepare for the less than best when you go viral. And this campaign did take off in ways that we did not expect, as Stephen Colbert showed us.
The city of Topeka will pay you up to $15,000 just to move there. The program Choose Topeka was created with the intention of investing in employees to live and work in Topeka and Shawnee County, so that we may foster an intentional community. That's important, an intentional community. Because right now, Topeka's current residents are all drivers who ran out of gas on their way to anywhere else. God love you, Topeka. Meanwhile...
Yeah, that was a fun morning. I come in the next day, I'm like, great. Did you see Stephen Colbert? He mentioned us. Yeah, he did. And they're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? I'm like, the pressure. But honestly, it gave us an opportunity to lean into that moment and kind of have some fun with it. And so we ended up creating this response for Stephen Colbert and rolled it out within 2 days.
Hey!
So that's where it's at, man. Whenever life gives you lemon, you turn it into lemonade. And honestly, it was a lot of fun. The community really rallied behind the response, and it really gave them some wind in their steps. And honestly, we talked with our CBS friends, and Stephen Colbert had a lot of fun with the response as well. So, we spent the money on the program. We put in the work. How did it turn out? This is where it landed, guys. When it came down to it, the program is only 2.5 years old now. We have had 8,500 applications to participate from around the world. We have had 94 families relocate to Topeka. That represents almost 400 people who have moved to the city. I said we were looking for a 6x return on investment. We got a 14.6x return on investment. Part of that was because we thought the average salary of a person moving would be around $60,000 a year. On average, the person moving to Topeka makes $90,000 a year. And so they are bringing high net worth families into our community. We have had 0 exits to date, which is a real testament to the community work that goes into, because you can pay a person to live anywhere. Whether or not they're going to stay there when the money runs out is a whole different thing. But we really believe that once you chose our community and you met the people that make our city amazing, you wouldn't want to leave. And so far, 2 years in, we haven't had anyone leave. We've had 66% of those people purchase homes, 34% of them have leased. And just in the first year alone, we had almost $4 million in economic impact. And like I said, that PR, whether it's Stephen Colbert, the New York Times, you name it, we had over $11 million in international earned media, which when you're trying to reintroduce your community to the world, you can't do better than that. Now, they also, when you're looking at who they are, you can see that generally 75% of them make over 60. So yes, on average they're 90, but we built this program to help anyone. So we have 3% of them that make $35,000 to $45,000 a year, 22% of them make $45,000 to $60,000. You have, of them, 27 did arrive from other communities in Kansas, but honestly, the majority of people came from half the states in the US. And actually, a surprisingly large number came from the Chicago area. So we had Chicago, we had California, Texas, and a lot from Missouri, because they were really drawn to the cost of living. So that's something for you guys to think about as well. If I have people from Chicago moving to Topeka, Kansas, you guys can definitely get people moving from Chicago to Peoria. And so we just gave them a reason to live a different life. Because as I've had a chance to screen a lot of these people looking to move here, they all shared a very similar story. They wanted something better for their life. They were tired of spending $2,500 and $3,000 a month in rent. They were tired of being in cities with failing school systems. They were tired of feeling trapped. And honestly, these incentives just gave them a lifeline. And $15,000 or $10,000 or $5,000 isn't a life-changing amount of money, but sometimes it's just enough to give you the confidence to do something different. And, as I kind of mentioned, 64 of those people actually came to work for our local employers. So even though the remote program gets a lot of attention, right now your employers in Peoria are aggressively competing for talent against every single other city in America. This program just gives us one more carrot, one more tool to arm themselves to go after that talent, so that they're not taking a job in Kansas City or Dallas. They're coming to Topeka to live a little more. Like I said, all that beautiful art media, since I'm the marketing and communication guy, I'm just gonna make you look at it. Just enjoy it, because I put so much time into it. And then where did we land? Guys, this is where I think it gets the most exciting. We just got US Census survey results coming out, and we had the fastest population growth in the last 2 years. Whereas over the previous 10 years, our population had flatlined and started to decline, we grew by 1,389 people in 2 years alone. Topeka now leads the state of Kansas in young families aged 25 to 44. We grew by 8% in those 2 years. Our children under the age of 18, we are the only large county in Kansas that actually saw children under 18 grow. We grew by 2%. And our diversity jumped by 7%, with Latinos at 5%, Asian up 25%, and those claiming to be biracial are 68%. And finally, in spite of the odds, we became younger in 2 years. Our average age dropped by 1.8 years in just 2 years. And that's what makes me excited about what we're accomplishing in Topeka. We're not done. This program just started. But what's happened is in just 2 years, it's paying off. Now, we can't be lazy, but we're getting there. And that's why I'm excited to kind of give you guys an opportunity to learn from it and make this your own. So now at this point, I'm going to invite Joshua up here, and we're going to ask some questions and give you a chance to kind of ask me anything you want to know.
Hey, let's hear it for Bob Ross, y'all. Thank you, man. So, to me, that is amazing. And if any of you have had a chance to talk to me over the past 2 years, you've heard me talk about these types of strategies and how passionate I am about it. Makes me feel good to hear somebody else's voice for a change. So thank you for that, Bob. But I also hope as you were listening to Bob, this wasn't just a celebration of Topeka. I hope you were able to replace Topeka with Peoria as he was talking. The similarities, in my opinion, are, anything you said, we could have replaced Topeka with Peoria, right? Like every single thing, right? Losing major headquarters, right? A city who people sort of often overlook, are down on each other, who sometimes we can be our own worst critics. If you ever looked at the comments on a Journal Star article about something great about Peoria, we can sometimes be our own worst critics, right? And I felt everything that you said, Bob, so thank you for doing that. I want to invite our panelists up for the Quality of Life in Place segment to join us here on stage as we continue this conversation. But I did want to make some space for questions really quickly. So I see some hands. I'll run around, and I hope my mic works. So as our panelists join, we'll ask questions, and we'll allow Bob to respond, and our panelists, please feel free to do so as well.
Sure. My name is Amy. I'm in the broadband industry, and I just wanted to ask you what in that plan that you guys did broadband play?
Did broadband, yes, with Wi-Fi, absolutely. Especially during the pandemic, we began to realize we have a real issue with digital equity. And so we began to see very quickly that if we're going to compete for remote talent, and if we're going to allow every child in Topeka the chance to succeed at the same rate, we have to really invest in that digital infrastructure. And we actually did compete for grants to be able to raise that bar. Because there are still neighborhoods in Topeka that if you live just a mile outside, you're not going to get the Wi-Fi or the internet speeds that you're going to need to be remote. We also began to invest heavily in co-working spaces to be able to provide those opportunities as well, bringing 3 online in the last year. Yep.
Now that we're in this post-COVID era, this was a great program like for the COVID era and everyone was working from home, but have you experienced any situations where these people, maybe they were remote workers, because a lot of these people take advantage, our remote workers came to your city thinking they'd live forever because their employer would let them work from home forever, and now finding they have to move back to these places like Chicago, San Francisco, because their employer now wants them in the office again?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. We haven't ran into it yet because the people that have moved here, their offices, or they've been essentially permitted to continue to work. What we have found is some people have actually quit their jobs that were remote and are actually now starting their own businesses. So we have one guy who was a video game designer in Palo Alto. He left the firm he was with and now designs video games from Topeka because the money he saved on rent and living in Palo Alto allowed him to start his own business.
Thank you, Bob. Andre Allen, councilman with the Peoria City Council. I had a question about your incentive, the relocation incentive you mentioned. Can you talk about, were there any banking institutions that helped as far as financing for those who were relocating to your community? Did they offer any type of incentive to make that process a little bit more smoother when it came to the home buying process?
They didn't offer any incentives, but that was actually a learning we did not prepare enough for in the beginning. We were so thoughtful about trying to roll out the program, we didn't think about the next step of kind of helping the process to move here go more smoothly. So over the last 2 years, we've worked a lot more with banking institutions like Capital Federal and Core First, 2 of the largest ones in our community, to help them get home loans more easily so they can understand the process and who to talk to, and also to work with our realtor agents so that they can understand how to navigate the home search process more effectively. But our banks don't offer any particular additional incentive.
Hi, do you have any data to show how you've helped the people in poverty move out of it?
How we've helped the people in poverty without...
Move out of poverty.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, for one, fortunately, like I said, we are getting the data points that are just showing that average wages have lifted people out of poverty by 44%. But if you actually look at what it means to be in poverty, that number is so aggressively low that sometimes it's false comfort. So we actually have other equity programs in the community that really try to go help In fact, there's a group called Scent that's actively working in a neighborhood called Highcrest, which was a very high-risk neighborhood. And we do a lot of funding with them in terms of community gardens, in terms of affordable housing options. And so there are different Go Topeka programs that are developed for that, that really have supporting low-income and low-wage families achieve better. But just high picture, you know, the number's gone down by 44%. But it doesn't feel like that if you're still one of the people that are in poverty. So we have work to do.
Bob, thank you. I'm Kevin Evans with the City of Peoria. Is there anything that you guys learned around bringing people to town remotely that required anything around code and city planning or anything like that in terms of people working in spaces that they hadn't traditionally worked in?
Yeah, no, fortunately we didn't have to work too much with the city about trying to recreate housing laws or different codes to be able to allow them to live. But we are actually doing a lot of work with refugees. And actually that did require some code enforcement conversations about what we can do for more transitional housing options. But for the remote workers, they've generally been able to move into apartments or homes.
Thank you, Bob. So we're going to move into a panel where you'll get an opportunity to ask some additional questions about quality of life and place. Please join me in thanking Bob one more time for sharing his expertise. Okay, so we're going to try an exercise here to get you guys up and moving really quickly. We want to get to our table facilitators. Please get to your assigned table, and let's move around, get to our table so that we can move into the quality of life and place discussion as a group. So we'll take just about 7 minutes to get that movement going, and I'll get us back started in 7 minutes.